Right, hello everybody. We're going to get started. Glad to have you all here. I'll be talking about client diversity and particularly how you can model your financial risk scenarios of your setup, or if you're thinking about changing your setup, what would be a good choice in terms of financial risk exposure. So I don't know if you've heard, but the Prism majority, supermajority has gone a while now. So yay. And Vitalik approves as well. That's my only meme I'm going to have. Sorry about that. I'm German, so not into the memes. Right, so are all our problems solved now? Unfortunately not. We're not done yet. So I'll give you a little bit of a background on myself. I'm Freddy. I'm the Ethereum ecosystem lead at Blockdaemon. Prior to that, I was co-founder of AnyBlock, and we got acquired by Blockdaemon end of last year. And that allows me to focus on all things Ethereum now. And to understand where we're coming from, Blockdaemon is an institutional-grade blockchain infrastructure provider. And as you can see by the numbers, we have 36,000 nodes, so lots and lots of nodes, and also a lot of stake. So that's why it's absolutely important that we worry about these things to provide our customers with the best service. But yeah, let's get into it. So I'll just show you briefly the current state of client diversity, then introduce you to my model, and I'm going to be sharing the link and the slides on Twitter afterwards, so you can grab it yourself and run it with your own numbers. And I also suggest some solutions, what you can do about your current setup or how to improve things, right? So as I said, we're already making progress, but we have to be continuously moving onward. So this is, I think, from Monday when I pulled this screenshot from clientdiversity.com, which is a great resource. So over the last few months, Prism has lost about 20 to 25% of their market share, and many people switched from Prism to Lighthouse, which is an achievement by itself, that people were actually doing something, realizing the problem, and then acting on it. So that's great. And also Teco and Nimbus, the smaller clients, also are rising, which is also great. And obviously, there's also a little bit of uncertainty about those numbers. To identify the clients is not easy. So there might be slight deviations in that. So that's great. That's what I meant with Prism has gone from 66, the supermajority level, down to, let's say, a 46 or a little bit lower, depending on which numbers you're going to take. So that's great. But also, Lighthouse in the process have moved above the 33% threshold. So that's not too good, because the scale of the problem, or the scale of the risk, has improved, but the probability has doubled, right? Because we now have 2 clients that are in the critical zone. So not too good. To give you a little background on, if you're not familiar, what those problematic thresholds are. So if more than 33% of the network would fail due to a client-level failure, then the chain cannot finalize. That means practically that exchanges would halt transfers, and also the inactivity leak penalties in the protocols would kick in to exit the failed node so that it can continue to finalize. That would also affect people that are not directly involved, because during that time there will be no rewards for those people as well. So there's a big loss of funds if that happens. Now, the next level up would be 50% majority. Then network may split. And then we got about 3 to 4 weeks to actually fix this before both of those finalize. And then we would have a chain split, and that would be really, really hard to resolve. So there would be an even greater loss of fund. And in the supermajority thing, that's like the worst case scenario, obviously. The faulty chain would finalize within like 15 minutes. So it's, we can't do much about it. And it would be catastrophic loss of funds. And basically the problem would be saved in the blockchain state forever, which is obviously really, really bad. So this is where those thresholds come from that people talk about. Now onto that financial risk, and then put some numbers on those risk factors. And I decided to put it in a model rather than a slide so that you can actually play around with your data. And those client diversity numbers also change over time, obviously, as I've just shown. So that means that you want to update that eventually on the current situation. And yeah, just as an attention grabber, I put this in here. So because I'm talking about nuclear problems, right? We're not talking about a little, civil war or something. This is big problems, right? There's also smaller problems, but like this talk is about the big ones, right? So this is the model, and I'm going to walk you through this a little bit. So here on the left side, you see like 5 different scenarios that are talking about the inactivity problems. So if the problem with the client would lead to not proposing blocks and not doing attestations, that would be the inactivity part. And on the right side, you see those same scenarios for slashable offenses. So this is much more unlikely that a client-level failure would lead to massive slashings, but also the consequences would be so much greater. So here I just played with some numbers. So I put the numbers that you've seen on the screen, I put them in here. So on the top here, you'll obviously see the different scenarios, and on the bottom here, you can put in however you diversified your client set. And those two together give you then underneath, in the result line here, the results for you personally, like for your staking operation, and also a network-wide level. And I color-coded this for ease of presenting this here. So you just put in a couple of numbers, basic numbers, and then you can play around with it. And I'm going to go into because we have limited time, I'm just going to fast forward. This is just how to use it. But this is basically the results that you can come up with. So if you're on a minority client, so a client that is used by less than 33% of the network, you don't have to worry about inactivity problems at all, which is great. So that is a great incentive to be on a minority client in itself, I think. But the problem is, even if an ideal world scenarios where all of those clients would have an equal market share of 25%, then the client level slashable bugs on the right side here would still have catastrophic consequences. We're talking like 20% of all ETH destroyed. Like that's like it's like nuclear war. Like you don't know what happened. Like civilization breaks down, Ethereum is dissolving. There's going to be all sorts of things, right? No, nobody knows. So that's really, really catastrophic. Those are the red numbers here. You can't read them maybe from the back, but just I encourage you to play around with it, and that's super bad. And that's just because you might see on Twitter, people are saying like client diversity is super important. This is why. That's what they are afraid of. Like the probability might not be great, but if it hits, it's catastrophic. That's why the nuclear war analogy is sort of a thing. On the inactivity side, that should be your main motivation, because that's sort of a risk that you might be, yes, it's catastrophic, but how likely is it? You might ignore it. But on the inactivity side, that's much more likely. And there has been real-world examples of this, and I put the link in here as well. So that should motivate you to be as diverse as possible and maybe overly rely on minority clients. Now, what I didn't model in this, and this is important, is I didn't model missed rewards. In both of these scenarios, or in the various scenarios of the 2 different categories, you will be missing rewards individually, and sometimes also the people that are not directly affected by the problem. So there's opportunity costs, there's small punishments, but they're comparatively insignificant. It's like a car accident versus a nuclear explosion, right? So much more likely, but less of a problem, I guess. So that's important to keep in mind. Like I said, I was focusing on the big things here. Now, I do want to leave room for questions, so I'm going through this rather quickly. So what to do about it? Like I always want to have some actionable insights to share, and I love to hear what you are doing or how you are thinking about this. So number one, I think this is a first world problem. So as catastrophic as this might be, I want to sort of bring it down to the bottom again is, in Ethereum, we're the only network, as far as I know, that has 4 different client implementations. Like, Solana stops if the Solana client fails. That's it, right? So Ethereum is in a privileged position with those clients. That being said, I think we should utilize them because they're all great, they're well-funded, a lot of people are putting hard work into it. So that's that. So if you're a big staking provider, let's say an institutional staking provider or a service provider, then if you are thinking of switching away from Prism, maybe better not to switch to Lighthouse, or at least not exclusively, because they're now also over the 33% threshold. So you're better off if you go to minority clients. And there's an interesting fact, even Nexus Mutual offers staking insurance now for if your client is on less than 10%, they would cover a problem there as well. That's an interesting option as well. Now, if you're setting up a new operation completely, what I can recommend is also the Vouch client. It's a multi-setup client. So a validator talks to different beacon chain nodes, and they could be of different types of clients. So let's say you have a Prism, a Lighthouse, and a Nimbus. And if one of those fails, then it could still build a block and attest to blocks out of, let's say, the Lighthouse. All right? So that's a pretty resilient setup that you can achieve there. And if you're an individual staker or a crypto-native staking provider, yeah, do consider the small clients. You can run it at home. Don't be afraid. A lot of those terrible scenarios don't affect you. You know, if your internet connection goes down at home, you're going to lose, you know, 0.0 ETH maybe in a day or something. So it's not a big problem. So don't be afraid. And the other part is you can obviously use liquid staking providers. Obviously, Lido has gone very large, but there's other options like Rocket Pool and Stakewise out there as well. The other part is, we've talked about the consensus layer, but we also have the execution clients, and they work in tandem after the merge. They have to be one-on-one matched. And on execution layer, you see the problem that Geth has still 80% market share. Now that's pretty bad, and I think that's where the focus should be sort of moved now. The problem is not as significant as on the consensus layer, because those execution layer clients have been battle tested for the last couple of years. Likely they're not involved in the slashing scenarios, so everything on the right side that you saw in the model is not going to apply for this. But the inactivity problems could actually kick in a worst case scenario. So there might be something. So basically, if you're thinking about client diversity, don't only consider the consensus layer, but also consider the execution layer. And again, I put some examples of real-life problems during the testing processes here. So yeah, don't stop when you sort of diversified your consensus layer. Also think about the execution layer. And leverage the community. There's great people advocating for this on Twitter. We have our liquid staking providers. We have great websites and resources to monitor that. Get involved. I put some resources there that help me compile all this knowledge. So yeah, let's continue the conversation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. One question about diversification. From one hand, you talked about the client diversification, what I think it's great. On the other hand, what do you think about the liquidity providers like Lido, where you as well don't do, where you're doing the opposite actually, and where as well Blockdaemon is part of?
Yes, that's right. That's something to be aware of. Like I said, Lido now has, I think, 32% of the Ethereum staking. I don't see it as an immediate problem because the node operators on Lido, there's, I think, more than a dozen operators, and like you said, Blockdaemon is one of them. So if there would be a problem with our operations on Lido, for example, all our nodes would go offline. It's not like 32% of the network would go offline. And Lido does a great job, actually. It's pushing the boundaries of all these node operators to diversify, both on the client level, on geography level, on cloud or bare metal provider level. So all of our operators run different types of setups in order to mitigate the risk. So Lido in itself is diversified in a way. and actually working on that. Now, there's still a sort of the risk that you're probably referring to is sort of a governance attack on the Lido token. That cannot be denied, but I personally think, and from, we're close to the Lido community, everybody is working to mitigate that and minimize that as much as possible at all. And I think with other great options out there, and for example, Rocket Pool, I think, wants to lower their initial stake that is needed, so for the capital requirements, which would be good for adoption for them, for example. There's institutional liquid staking coming up, so there's all sorts of options that are going to balance it out a little bit better.
Another question?
Hi, Freddy. How does slashing insurance work on Block Daemon?
We have a traditional insurance, basically, and we also, so that covers a couple of things, and we are making our customers whole. Like, if we mess up, we're going to take care of it. That's just, as an institutional provider, that's just basically self-explanatory. But what we wouldn't cover is if the protocol, like if there's a client level failure, so let's say all Prism or all Litos or whatever fails across the board, yeah, we can't do anything about that. And like I said, those would probably have very bad consequences to, and no, you couldn't even buy an insurance like that, right? Because you can't insure against nuclear war. It's just a fact of the game. But yeah, basically we're obviously promising our customers that they don't have to worry about these things. Any more questions? Okay, thank you very much.